Welcome, everyone. This is Mike Meriton, and an exciting panel discussion. If you've had the question, what should I use, DCAM or CDMC? You've tuned in to the right panel for today. This will be moderated by someone who helped build out the CDMC framework with a whole bunch of other people. Mark McQueen, who is the managing partner in the US for Ateca. So Mark, good to have you today. I will turn it to you to introduce the rest of your panel.
Thanks, Mike. Welcome to all that have joined us, and also our panel. Before I introduce the panel, I'm going to go through just a couple things to set the stage for what we're going to talk about. This question of why should I use DCAM or CDMC? What should I use? Jump into the next slide here. So if we look at this from a use case standpoint, this suggests there are 6 use cases for DCAM and CDMC in comparison. So advice and guidance, both are presenting best practice. The best practice in DCAM is comprehensive best practice for what I call data management blocking and tackling. And the best practice that is recommended in the cloud data management capability is around how to leverage the opportunity that's in the cloud and how to automate your data management in that environment. Both frameworks present requirements. So in terms of, neither of them are actually requirements documents, but they suggest what the requirements are for your data management capabilities and for those capabilities in the cloud, and then very specifically requirements around the automations that CDMC is recommending. They both offer an assessment capability assessment of data management, the 8 components that are in DCAM, and similarly a readiness assessment of your capabilities and your automations that you've created in the cloud environment. Now, where CDMC becomes different than DCAM is DCAM stops with that assessment. You can go into a capability certification by using the CDMC framework, and then also a certification of the controls. And those controls are both the controls that are offered by the cloud environment, as well then your consumer of the cloud use of those controls in your environment. And then finally, the CDMC is about to publish a new interoperability standard around an information model that is going to be very, very valuable as you move forward and have data potentially still on-prem, in the cloud, and maybe even in 2 cloud environments. Now, this second model here is suggesting a little different look on the comparison of DCAM and CDMC through the eyes of process, people, data, and technology. So requirements around process, requirements for people, data, and technology. DCAM, heavy dark orange here in the process, is really about building out your basic data management processes and then aligning those people to the processes, and then a focus on management of metadata with an overlay of technology that helps you execute those manual processes that you've created in your organization. Whereas CDMC is really leveraging, this light orange color is leveraging those foundational capabilities that DCAM defines, connecting people to a data catalog, really heavy influence on the data catalog and how that data catalog can drive everything through your execution. Focuses on automating the capture of that metadata into the catalog, and then ultimately establishing that basis for automated data management through the automated controls. You know, Ali, I'm going to quote you the other day, we were in a meeting. DCAM is really the business side of data management, and CDMC is the technology side of data management. How do we automate our data management going forward? So with those as a background of comparing the 2 frameworks, you know, we can't lose sight that this is always about the data. I like to be provocative and say there is no ROI on data management. There is only ROI on the data that comes out of data management and how that data is used in your organization. So it's really about meeting the business objectives. So I'm thrilled to have an esteemed panel today. Many of the leaders, the core leaders that created the CDMC framework. Ollie Beige, Head of Data Architecture and Data Analytics for London Stock Exchange Group. Rich Paris, Executive Director at Morgan Stanley. Jubair Patel, Senior Cloud Solutions Architect at Microsoft Azure. And then one of my partners, Gareth Isaac, Partner for Data Architecture and Cloud Practice Lead for Orteca. So we're going to move into a set of questions across the panel. And Rich, the first question I'm going to head your way. Is CDMC dependent upon DCAM? Yeah.
So great question. Great question, Mark. I suppose you've hinted at it earlier that DCAM is the business side of things. Certainly from my point of view as an IT architect, it's an assessment framework for data and analytics management. It really does cover the fundamentals of data management and help set the data and management strategy. DCAM asks for engagement from all of the necessary stakeholders, and it establishes a governance structure in the process of doing that. CDMC was really born from a completely different challenge. Several groups at different banks were in discussions with the different cloud providers. We were all describing procedures, policies, and most importantly, the tooling and controls that we use across our in-house control planes and our opinions about what we needed to do something similar on the cloud. The group was trying to do this and help the CSPs deliver automation and tooling to ease the finance sector's adoption of cloud technology. Now, obviously, different groups had different approaches, and those led to different priorities and different ways of explaining or structuring their asks to the cloud service providers. So some people were going more of an infrastructure as a service way, some people were going platform as a service, different cloud providers, and just different priorities and different risk postures across the firms. The CDMC work group came together as we wanted to describe the ask, and a core part of agreeing, we want to describe the ask as a core part of agreeing a set of standards or a core framework that we could all buy into and we could all communicate with the cloud service providers and technology companies. So CDMC is really a best practice assessment and certification framework for the management and control of data in the cloud, including multi-cloud and hybrid cloud environments. It highlights extra considerations around data that should be thought about when using cloud platforms. It also highlights opportunities for the standardization and automation of data management controls. CDMC focuses and expands on capabilities that are critical to the control of sensitive data. It does set a high bar for financial institutions and technology companies and the cloud service providers, but it's a target to mature toward. With regards to that, really the answer to the question, how does CDMC work with DCAM? CDMC assumes that you have strong foundations and with data management capabilities, and you've got the strategy and you've got everything in place to launch onto the cloud. And CDMC helps with the controls and the management and all of the capabilities for thinking about how you would additionally control the data on the cloud. DCAM is a great foundation and a great part for starting that journey.
So Ollie, I want to turn to you, and just you and Rich worked hand in hand leading this project. Anything you have to add to his comments there?
Yeah, well, I think one of the most helpful things that we had during the creation of CDMC was the DCAM material to hand. So when we, with our focus on getting working software to implement these controls, what we needed was a solid foundation of the definition of what data management and data governance really was. And DCAM presented us with that. And it was a great partnership between the EDM Council and DCAM practitioners and the kind of cloud engineers who are looking to take those processes and those controls and working out how do we turn that into software that means that this is always on control rather than just something you have to remember or have a control process for. So that was the most helpful thing.
Yeah, you're making me think. We just completed a DCAM assessment with a large European bank that had some of the highest DCAM capability scores I've encountered in any assessments. But they were astute enough to be looking at CDMC as those automations can take, again, they're blocking and tackling data management and take it to scale on a way that they're struggling, with just in the manual wrangling of the data that they still have to do, even though they built really good foundational capabilities. Joubert, moving to you. How do you see that you can use DCAM and CDMC together?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Effectively, on the supplier side here of the coin, we're obviously responding to all of the requirements that were raised in the CDMC at Microsoft Azure. So I work with around 2,500 customers that are data and AI consumers of Microsoft services. And across that spectrum, you see customers who are brand new to the topic of data governance in industries that haven't had the same scrutiny as FS. And at that point that Rich made around having a baseline of data management in your organization to be able to supplement with CDMC, that becomes very real. So to be able to speak to some customers in that space that maybe don't have the maturity of data management at the beginning, that's where DCAM really comes into play to explain these are the core concepts. This is the organizational structure. These are the base policies and processes you need to be able to manage data in your organization. And then CDMC, in my view, is whenever I look at new organizations or organizations starting to move their data into the cloud, it is a necessity when it comes to looking at how to manage data at the scale that cloud is currently regarding. So we estimate somewhere between 120 and 150 zettabytes of data are going to be in the cloud by 2025. And that necessitates automation and a metadata approach to data management. And that's exactly what CDMC defines. So anyone that's looking at either greenfield or uplifting their data architectures in the cloud and are looking at future-proofing those solutions for data management in the future at the scale that's required should be looking at CDMC. And those that need to catch up potentially and understand at the base what is our requirement for data management should be looking at DCAM as an entry point into that question.
Great, thanks, Joubert. Gareth, from your consulting perspective, anything to add to Joubert's comments?
No, I think Joubert covered a lot of it. I mean, I look at CDMC as more the digitization of data governance. We're moving to a codification and really enabling this through technology. DCAM is much more top-down. It's sort of a enterprise-wide, push-down, logical view of things. And CDMC is like very project level because it's technology, it's on the cloud, and it pushes up. And to my mind, that's where we meet in the middle, and they're very complementary. Yeah, we're just approaching it from two different directions. But one you can really enable on a project or a program level out of the box. The other one's far more cultural and driven down. And we end up like digging the channel tunnel, meeting in the middle. So I think, as all organizations are moving towards that sort of cloud platform, they've certainly in the FS space gone, no, okay, we need to scale, let's go. How do we offset our risks and do that? That's really where CDMC comes in. It's a little bit more of a playbook, a little bit more of a cookbook. So I recognize we're short on time, so I'll hush now for that question. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Gareth. Ollie, there's been some reaction to the heavy controls framework orientation of CDMC as, well, there's the finance industry from a very defensive position, regulatory, compliance. Talk about the power of CDMC from an offensive standpoint rather than just a defensive standpoint.
Yeah, well, you're right, Mark. CDMC was born out of a checklist that we needed to use to make sure people had got all the controls covered before they moved any kind of sensitive data onto public cloud. And that meant you had the key tenets of BCBS 239 in there, of GDPR, lots and lots of financial services and privacy regulations that have been boiled down into this baseline of capabilities. And we did, at the beginning of the CDMC process, talk with the exec sponsors about, what should the emphasis be on things like data marketplaces or analytics platforms? And the consensus was, let's get the baseline controls right first, and then move CDMC into these more offensive spaces later on in its life. And we're at that point now. So for 2022, we've been looking at how to extend the core CDMC with some CDMC plus bolt-ons. I'm particularly interested in the analytics domain, where you'll be able to use some of these CDMC controls to manage sensitive analytical assets. So if you've trained a machine learning model on some sensitive data, well, that model is still sensitive, right? You'll be able to ask it questions that are just as sensitive as the original data set. Or if you're dealing with third-party licensed data from, LSEG as a big data company has a lot of clients who have this problem, where you need to know what are you allowed to do with this data for your clients. Are you allowed to display it? Are you allowed to onward distribute it? Are you allowed to use it in your own models or elsewhere? CDMC has built-in data management controls that will help you manage that and take the cost out of dealing with lots of different analytical and data platforms right down. So you can get to that data scientist nirvana space where you've got access to lots of different data sources. You know that the sensitive data is taken care of because CDMC is switched on, but you also have this interoperability between different cloud environments and different analytics environments because they all speak the same metadata language, and that's a CDMC feature as well.
Great, thanks, Ollie. Gareth, I'm going to toss you a softball. As my consulting partner, why or when should an organization consider using a DCAM authorized partner, a CDMC authorized partner, as they try to use these frameworks in their organization?
So we go how. So if you go to the EDMC council page, it's got a list of authorized partners. Obviously, I have a preference, but there is a full list available on there. When it's going to be one of those sort of consultant answers of it depends, right? For all intents and purposes, CDMC, and if you're a member of EDM Council, DCAM's available for each organization for free. You can self-assess, so you can do that. So why would you deal with consultancy or a CAP partner? Really, it's much to do with sort of, as consultants, we will bring in a broader view of what's to do, where to approach it, how to approach it, where the rabbit holes are, because we've seen it and corrected other organizations. I know organizations tend to want to do it themselves because it's cheaper and easier, but actually time to market is often slower, and the quality it often has to get remarked. And then certainly for CDMC, as you go to certification, you'll be marking your own homework in preparation for the exam. And in general, that's not going to really work out historically very well. So understanding the view of the data. So each of the sort of CAP companies will have been involved in the creation of CDMC and DCAM. So they understand the intent and the meaning in between the words, what the where it's going, what's going to be required on the test, and then really where it's going to be in like a year or two's time, so they can help guide you towards that. And I think that's something that, as much as we try and write the standards and the specification down, it becomes quite hard to really articulate all of those. I can't remember how many hours Mike said, but I remember it's like $5 million worth of consultants' time put into this documentation and the standards. How do you take that and move that forwards? So I think really that's what we're trying to do. That's why you should engage at the right time. You obviously don't want it to be too early. Get familiarity with the standards, but minimally they will be able to provide some guidance of the directionality and the highest value for you guys being done. And it's also worth calling out, I'm just checking the time, But there are different certifications. So you can have certifications of the technology providers, as Elation did with Snowflake, the CSPs themselves, and then the technology consumers as a whole.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Garrett. Yeah, Jubair, I'm going to go to you. You've been on the client side, you've been on the consulting side, and now you're on the technology provider side. Do you have any words of wisdom as to how that all works together for the organization?
Yeah, I honestly think that if a organization is certified in the CAP, there are organizations that have been certified in DCAM for a long time now. There's a lot of experience out there. Those organizations that are certified in the CAP and are really taking it seriously, whether it's providers like Microsoft and the other providers, the cloud providers that were involved, the tech providers, even the consultancies, those are the guys that are really looking at the next wave of doing this. And those are predominantly the guys that have actually lived through the challenges of trying to do this manually and without what the CDMC mandates and allows us to get to. This idea of having metadata driven, having technology first, having engineering first approach to data management is what the cloud providers are really getting behind. And given so much of that data now resides in places where the cloud providers have not just a way off, but also a bit of a responsibility in helping customers manage that data and that risk around that data. Having a cloud provider that knows intimately what the CDMC means and the history behind it is, I think, a very, very good thing for customers to understand. So we are, from a Microsoft perspective, looking at really helping build out the suite of services that are going to take away a lot of that pain for customers. So that's where we, in our experience and our work with the CDMC, has been so pivotal to our product design directly.
So thank you. So we've gone through our planned questions. I've got a couple questions I'm going to field from the participants here. But Ali, I'm giving you a heads up. I'm going to come back to you and ask you to talk about why is this a cloud data management framework? Don't I still have data on-prem, or maybe I have my data in more than one cloud? So I'm giving you a minute, not that you need a minute to organize your thoughts, but two relatively quick housekeeping. Jignesh asked, how does CDMC overall with BCBS 239? So Orteca has been developing a data management requirements model that is a comprehensive set of people, process, data, and technology requirements. We're doing this and we're giving it to the council, and it's being vetted by the council and will be made available to all members. So that requirements layer is actually an interpretation layer that allows DCAM to be mapped to those requirements and CDMC to be mapped to those requirements in a way that then you inherit the relationship between DCAM and CDMC through that requirements model. Similarly, the council has previously had BCBS 239 mapped directly to DCAM and has had GDPR mapped directly to DCAM. Those two have been remapped to these requirements layers. So what that does with this requirements layer as your interpretation, anything you map to the requirements layer, you automatically inherit the relationship to everything else that's been mapped to that requirements layer. And the council expects to publish that model sometime in February. And there will be a webinar that will be introducing that model and use cases and how to use the model that will come similar in that February time when it's published. The other quick question is, how can I get a copy of the DCAM framework? If you are a member, you can get the DCAM framework on the council's website in a members only area. The CDMC framework is a free license framework that you can download it even if you are not a member from the EDM Council's website. So both, one framework is restricted to members only, the other one is available. So Ali, in our remaining 5 minutes and we'll wrap up, how do you feel that, is this just cloud automation, or is this automation I can or should apply on-prem? How do I make those work together?
Well, it's a really smart question. The dirty secret of CDMC is that it's not really cloud in particular that we're creating a framework for here. It's data management. However, by bolting cloud on the front, my goodness, it got a lot of attention and people got behind it and started moving quickly on it. And it was quite easy to assemble a big team. But really, the cloud aspect of it is for every one of these controls, we spend a lot of time thinking about what the control is or what's required, what best practice is, what experienced people have done in this space over the last decade. And then we added an automation feature at the end, which was a request to each cloud provider or technology platform provider for hybrid or on-prem data to automate that control, please. So you can take CDMC, lock the C off the front, and it is a data management capability set of specifications. And if you read the whole specification document, you get a kind of very technical flavor view of what an organization that's got a relatively mature data governance model, maybe done DCAM assessments, and is looking to move sensitive data onto cloud and guarantee that they've not got it wrong. And then those automated controls just reduce the cost of that right down. So you can effectively get best-in-class data management capabilities without having to pay for a huge team of specialized engineers to build that for you.
Great. So one of the, I mentioned the organization that just completed a very high scoring DCAM assessment, but they still saw value out of being able to go to scale with the automations. Another use case is working with a much smaller bank that's in more of a greenfield kind of environment. They're really just embracing DCAM and starting to put what we've described as those foundational capabilities in place. But they have the opportunity to, what I would suggest, leapfrog over that wrangling of data. You know, they still need some of those basic foundations, but they could go ahead and jump to the cloud, to the automations, and skip all that nasty work in the middle that we've all had our hands dirty, you know, doing manual data lineage and capturing of metadata. You know, so skip that wrangling and jump to the automations and be able to provide value to their organization quicker.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Whatever scale you're operating at, whether it's a small data project or it's a whole data company's worth of content, you know, we're dealing with tens of petabytes of data products in my space, and we're looking at how CDMC helps reduce the cost of integration with our future data platforms for clients. But we've also used it internally for small projects like our digital twin, you know, where it's a relatively limited number of data sets of operational data. It's all internal use cases. It's not spread out over lots of clouds or anything like that. But the same principles are really useful, that you are going to know what data you've got, know where it is and how sensitive it is, and know that the controls are switched on if it is sensitive. And that's what CDMC gives you.
Great. Well, with that, I'm just looking real quick at any last questions. I think we're good. I want to thank this panel, Gareth, Joubert, Rich, Ali. Thank you for joining the panel, but thank you for what all of you did to create this CDMC framework and the impact that it's having on our industry. So with that, I need to jump to, well, I skipped over. If you ever want to talk to Orteca, please give us a call. These materials will be available to you. And we need to go back to the final wrap up. We were the last, and you need to go to the raffle and you might win some more training. So thank you everybody for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark.
Thanks, Mark.